Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 23 deadline decisions. This is a video where I take you through your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the upcoming deadline. If you are enjoying the content here on this channel and you get any use out of today's video, please do smash that like button. Make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So the first thing to discuss today is actually Newcastle. We've not discussed Newcastle in a while. We used to discuss them every week because Botman, was he returning, wasn't he returning? There was issues around Wilson and Isak, and it felt like for a long period of time we discussed Newcastle every week. But it's been a little while now. But the reason that we're discussing Newcastle is they are now coming out of those bad fixtures. And as you can see on their screen, they are about to go on a seriously nice run of fixtures. The next three include Luton, Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth, two of those being at home. They also play Wolves at home in 27, and the likes of Anthony Gordon we know are much better at home, as well as Newcastle in general. So these fixtures require us to look towards Newcastle, and on top of that, their performance in Game Week 22 against Aston Villa was very impressive. Now, I think it was a combination of Villa are playing very poor at the moment, and Newcastle played quite well in that game, but nonetheless, that was an extremely impressive performance when Aston Villa are usually so good at home. So there are a few questions around Newcastle, such as, given the Newcastle fixtures, is now the time to jump on? Is it Newcastle defence or is it Newcastle attack? And then, is Gordon the best Salah replacement? There are a couple of things that obviously aren't great about Newcastle, so I'll start with the stuff that I'm a little bit less confident on. The first being they do still have quite a few key injuries, especially in their attack. In fact, Anthony Gordon may well be playing as the number 9 because both Isak and Wilson are injured once again. So they still aren't a fully functional squad at the moment, and they have been very inconsistent across this season and in recent game weeks, right? We can't really rely on Newcastle this season the way that we have in the previous season. So there are a lot of things to worry about. On top of that, I do have a bit of an issue with the fixtures in that the week that we really need all of our players is blank Game Week 26. And the reason that I say that is because Liverpool, Luton, Chelsea and Spurs are all blanking. A lot of us will probably have 2 or 3 Liverpool assets, and we'll probably have Richarlison, Porro, Palmer, and maybe some other players like you may own Augusto or you may own a Doughty. And therefore you are going to need every single player, even if it's your third sub usually, to be available for 26. And whilst, yes, Newcastle could do something, Arsenal away is one of the most difficult fixtures that you can have in the Premier League. So if you get a Botman or a Burn, who I do think are really nice options, unfortunately the week that you really need them is the week that you probably wouldn't want to play them. And on top of that, at the moment, Newcastle are very, very likely to blank in Game Week 29 as well. So in the 2 weeks that you really need all of your players, the 2 blank game weeks, they're probably going to have a blank fixture and Arsenal away. So that's the main reason that I'm less keen on the Newcastle assets, but maybe from an attacking perspective, it's less of an issue. If you pick up an Anthony Gordon and you have to play him against Arsenal away, is it the end of the world? Maybe not. When you pick up a Burn or a Botman, again, it feels like you want your defender to have a slightly better fixture than that, especially when they don't carry that much attacking threat. So from a fixtures perspective, especially given some of the games as such as Luton at home and Forest away, I feel like the fixtures maybe do lean slightly more towards the attack. But Botman and Burn will offer really good value now if Newcastle decide to go on a run where they start keeping clean sheets again. And I do genuinely think they are a side that are built to keep clean sheets. And whilst they have a lot of injuries to their attack, I feel like their defence, obviously still missing Nick Pope, is largely settled. But there's a lot of narrative bias with what I've just presented you today. I've just said, oh, I think Newcastle could be a good defence again. Let me present the data to you. So in the last 6 game weeks, Newcastle are comfortably bottom of the league for expected goals conceded. So they have conceded over the last 6 games 17.2 expected goals. The second worst side is Fulham at 12.2. So 5 goals in it between Newcastle and the second worst. And then it's actually Spurs with 11.3, then Brighton, then Palace, then Burnley, then Sheffield United. So Newcastle are comfortably the worst defence in the league. And even if you remove that massive 7 goals that they expected goals they conceded against Liverpool, they're still defending really poorly and they're still giving up a hell of a lot of chances. So there is a real concern there. Now, if I'm to switch that to XG, and by the way, I'm using Fantasy Football Hub to get this data. If I now switch to XG over the last 6, they are the second best attack in the league, only behind Liverpool. So Liverpool are comfortably the best with 17 expected goals in the last 6 games, whereas Newcastle are at 12.58 ahead of Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea and Man City. So the data suggests over the last 6, unless you think this is going to suddenly change, that it is certainly the attack that is worth investing in for Newcastle, and that if it continues with this trend, they'll continue to score a lot, but they'll give up a lot of chances. So, yes, Anthony Gordon is probably an asset worth considering. Now, his own data isn't fantastic. It's fine. It's pretty good for his price. I think at his price, we do need to consider him one of the better assets. When you combine his price, his output, his consistency, the attacking data of Newcastle, and the fixtures, I think there's very little to dislike about him. And again, in the absence of Wilson and Isak, I do think that Gordon is likely to play as the 9. I don't think that is good or bad. I actually think he's probably slightly better on the left, but I also think he will be the one that has to get the goals for them. So I'm looking at it now, and yes, if you can't afford De Bruyne, or you just don't want to move to De Bruyne, and let's say we don't get the Liverpool double announced, which we'll discuss in a second a bit later when we look at Salah, but if the Liverpool double for 25 doesn't get announced, which I still think it will, and you don't want to move therefore for Diogo Jota, I would say, caveats aside with Jota and KDB, Gordon probably is the best replacement for Salah, and he's so cheap still. You could probably do Salah to Gordon, whoever the strikers you're replacing, to Haaland, and it's probably going to give you money in the bank. Because if you're selling like a Watkins or an Alvarez or a Darwin or a Solanke, they're all more expensive than Gordon, right? So you're actually going to gain money by doing that probably. So yeah, do you know what? I think Gordon, again, caveats aside with KDB being fantastic and Jota maybe being worthwhile if that double gets announced, Gordon probably is, for me, the best Salah replacement. And I don't think there are that many standout replacements. You, of course, have the Palace midfielders that you could go for, Eze and Elise, if they are fit. You could move from Manchester United mid, maybe Man United are trending in the right direction. There are various other players that you can consider, but I don't see any other standout assets for me, other than the 2 that I've already mentioned, that are better than Gordon. So if I am to bring in a cheaper midfielder this week for Salah in order to allow me to get Haaland, and I'm going to discuss my team at the end of the video, it probably is going to be Anthony Gordon, and it would be my first time owning him. And I would go as far as saying, we're not really going to discuss captaincy too much here. We'll probably do that on the deadline stream, because I think it will mainly depend around Haaland. But if we don't feel comfortable handing Haaland the armband, I would go as far as saying Anthony Gordon could be one of the best captaincy shouts. I will just chuck in here as the final thing on Anthony Gordon. He could potentially be on penalties. There's no Isak and there's no Wilson. We don't yet know who is third in line for penalties. Some people are saying Bruno G. Some people are saying Trippier. Others are saying Joelinton when he's available. I think Gordon could quite comfortably be on penalties as well. The other name that has been chucked in there, apparently he takes penalties very well, is Fabian Schär. If Fabian Schär's on penalties, then he's in everyone's team all of a sudden. So maybe if you want to take the risk, I mean, he's just scored a brace. Maybe Fabian Schär could be an option. So yeah, I'll leave it there. I think the attack is worth investing in more than the defense. But when I say the attack, I mean Anthony Gordon. If you are looking for a cheaper defender and you are happy playing them against Arsenal away in 26 and then probably not having them in game week 29, and you think that they can turn it around defensively, there are probably worse punts than you can take on the likes of Botman and Burn, and maybe even paying a little bit extra for the goal threat of Fabian Schär. Right, then we need to talk about Manchester City because there are tons of questions coming from you guys around all of their assets, their fixtures, combinations. There were just so many questions around Manchester City. So I'll do my best to just discuss all of the assets and what I think about them right now. I will just timestamp that I'm recording this at 10 p.m. on Thursday, and Pep Guardiola should have his usual press conference on Friday afternoon. But just bear in mind that Man City don't play until Monday for game week 23. So whatever Pep says, it could even be truthful. That could, of course, change after the deadline on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday daytime. So it could be that he goes from saying Haaland's looking really good to if Haaland aggravates his injury over Saturday, Sunday, he might not even be in the squad. So that's always the issue, that we're going to get the press conference a few days before their Monday game. Fixtures-wise, I don't think they're that perfect, but the next 4 game weeks are great, given that they don't have any overly difficult fixtures, and they, of course, have a double game week 25 with both games being at home. In fact, in 24 and 25, they play 3 home games. Man United at home isn't awful, but then Liverpool away in 28. They are then going to blank in 29, and I think it's actually Arsenal or another difficult fixture in game week 30. So looking after game week 26, I don't think we're going to want many, if any, Man City assets, and therefore don't feel like you've got to go into double game week 25 with 3 of them, given that after 26, you're probably going to want to remove 1, 2, or maybe all 3. When it comes to the best City triple up, and I do still think that there is obviously value in going with 3 for the double, Haaland is going to be one of those 3. Unless he just continues to not start, and we'll discuss that in a second, Haaland is one of the best Man City assets, of course. So let's say that Haaland is a given. De Bruyne kind of has to be in the equation as well for me. Yes, he's very expensive. And no, I still don't think he's going to start every game. But if you have the money to go there, if you're going away from Salah, and you can find other ways to get Haaland in as well, yeah. I mean, KDB is brilliant. His data continues to be consistently good whenever he plays. We know that he's good for goals and for assists as well. And you do feel comfortable handing him the armband. If Haaland's minutes continue to be a little bit less secure than they were last season, maybe De Bruyne becomes a captaincy option in some games alongside Haaland. Maybe in the double game week, if De Bruyne starts the next 2, there's some consideration there for a De Bruyne captain or even De Bruyne triple captain. Now, given the fact that there are concerns around Walker's minutes now, given the stuff that is going on off the field, and outside of that, all of the other Manchester City defenders are now fully fit, I'm not sure it's worth going for the City defenders. And you have to remember that the upside with them is very low because not many of them outside of Ake carry much attacking threat. Because City often score lots of goals, they don't really pick up that many bonus points either. You are probably looking at a best case scenario of 12 to 14 points for the Man City defenders in that double game week if they keep 2 clean sheets. And I'm not convinced Chelsea at home and Brentford at home is 2 clean sheet fixtures. You could see 1, but then you're looking at 8 points. Let's say that Foden and Alvarez each only start 1 game in the double, which I think they could start both, but let's say they only start 1, but they get you a goal and they get you appearance points in the other off the bench. They'll probably outscore that 8 points, even if they only start 1 fixture. So I almost think with the best City triple up, even if Foden and Alvarez don't start both games, they may still be better value than the defenders. And also, you have to remember, a lot of the City defenders are quite expensive when you consider what they actually offer. So I think the best City triple up is probably, if I were on a wild card this week, I would go Haaland, De Bruyne, and one of Foden or Alvarez. When it comes to Foden or Alvarez, it really depends how you predict the minutes going, right? If you think KDB and Haaland are going to start pretty much every game, well, then that means there is only one more spot in the midfield, really, which goes to one of Foden or Alvarez. If you think Foden will continue to play central alongside KDB, well, then Alvarez just isn't going to be starting. If you think Foden is shifted out to the right, well, then that might be good for Foden's minutes, but then he's then challenging Bernardo Silva for that right wing spot, which maybe then leaves a spot for Alvarez. Maybe it could be Alvarez, KDB, and Haaland, but again, that doesn't feel particularly likely. I think KDB and Haaland starting on a regular basis probably isn't particularly good for Foden or Alvarez, but I would probably predict that it's slightly worse for Alvarez because Foden can at least play on the right. He can also play on the left if Doku and Grealish are unavailable. So Foden feels the most adaptable in that he can play various positions, specifically being out on the right. But again, if he's not going to want Bernardo Silva in the middle and he's not going to want Foden in the middle and he's going to want like KDB, Haaland, and then a combination of other players. For example, we obviously had Nunez playing alongside Rodri in midfield in Game Week 22. If he continues to favour that, then Foden is directly competing with Bernardo Silva. And we saw Bernardo Silva getting benched in Game Week 22. I would predict that Foden's probably going to get benched soon as well. He'll probably get a complete rest because they have a lot more players back and available now. So I don't think Foden or Alvarez's minutes are that secure. But if you were to ask me over the next 5 to 6 game weeks who gets more minutes, Foden or Alvarez, I would say the answer is probably Foden. And with Haaland and KDB back, Alvarez would no longer have penalties and no longer have set pieces. So I feel like the advantages that Alvarez has really diminishes in comparison to Foden. So to put that together, I've spent a long time talking about just the ideal triple up. But the ideal triple up for me on a wildcard probably would be KDB, Foden and Haaland. I would skip the defence and I would probably risk going without Alvarez. Then we get to, do I think Haaland will start in Game Week 23? Caveat, again, I've not seen the press conference from Pep. I also have absolutely no idea. But my prediction is yes. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't. Yes, there were obviously a few things we didn't like about his performance in 22. Maybe looked a little bit sluggish, didn't really do much off the bench. But he still got around half or 20 minutes off the bench. He got some running time. He's been training for a couple of weeks now in full team training. There are 5 days between their game against Burnley and their game against Brentford. I don't see any reason why he would come off the bench for 20 and then need to do that again. I think Haaland will probably start against Brentford, but no, I don't expect him to get more than 60 to 70 minutes. So my prediction right now is that Haaland will play 63 minutes in Game Week 23. I'm not going to sit on the fence. I'm going to say that is what I think will happen, but that doesn't mean that I have any confidence or certainty in that. Given that that is my probable prediction, I am looking at the moment at probably bringing in Erling Haaland for 23, but I don't love it. And it then becomes difficult. Do you captain Haaland when you're not sure that he's going to start? And you could quite easily get what we got in 22, which is 20 minutes off the bench and a 1-pointer. It becomes very difficult to captain a player that you know, even if they start, they're not probably going to get 90 minutes. So it is very tricky. But I'm going to predict that he starts but doesn't get the full 90. We just spoke about whether Foden is a minutes risk now. Absolutely, given that he's not going to play central every game. We don't think anyway. He's probably going to play on the right a little bit, which is where Bernardo Silva's been playing. And yes, one of Bernardo Silva and Foden could play central with KDB, but we don't know if that will happen on a consistent basis. And yes, I therefore think that Foden is a slight minutes risk now. If you are asking me, is Foden in Man City's best 11? Absolutely. And will Foden start more games than not? Absolutely, but I don't think he starts every single game. I do still think he's an absolutely fine purchase. Will Kevin De Bruyne start again in Game Week 23? My prediction for this is maybe less certain. I'm not going to say no, because I think he's playing very well and he looks pretty fit at the moment. But I am more confident of a Haaland start than a KDB start, which might sound strange. And this is, in all honesty, just my opinion. I've got nothing to really back this. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Haaland given the start and Alvarez dropped into midfield, because we know he can play that role very, very well. And maybe that means Foden goes back into a central role and Bernardo Silva goes on the right. I mean, there's so many moving pieces with Manchester City. And especially when we start to get fixture congestion again for them, it's very difficult to tell. But I do think that KDB's minutes are going to be better than I initially thought. I was a little bit worried when I saw him play against Newcastle. He came on for like 25 minutes and he looked absolutely knackered after running around. And he made a very obvious point that he can't do that for 90, but he's starting to look a little bit better at the moment. I still don't think he's going to get 90 ever, or at least on a consistent basis. I think a lot of the time he'll be off around 60 to 70, but I think maybe he'll get more starts than we think. So even if he is benched against Brentford, you're pretty confident then of a start against Everton, and he's probably going to get, I would say, 100 to 120 minutes in that double. So I think I underestimated KDB's minutes slightly, and I'm happy to put my hands up and admit that and say that maybe he's a better option than I initially thought. The final question is one that is directly relevant to me, which is do you sell Alvarez to bring Haaland in, or do you sell someone else and maybe have both Alvarez and Haaland? I really don't want to sell Alvarez. The reason for that is if either Haaland or KDB aggravate their injury, Alvarez comes straight back in to the starting 11 and will either take set pieces or penalties depending on who it is that aggravates their injury. Yes, that is very hypothetical, but it is definitely possible. And even if neither of them get injured again, whenever KDB and Haaland don't start, which I do think their minutes will be managed, well then again, Alvarez is the one that starts. And there is a world in which he can start alongside KDB and Haaland, although again, I think that's less likely. But it just feels crazy selling a player that's just scored a brace with the fixtures that he's got coming up and a double game week that is still likely to get good minutes in one of the best attacks in the league. And again, when Haaland's not on the pitch, he's on pens. When KDB's not on the pitch, he's on a lot of set pieces. It just doesn't sit quite right with me. But my other options are Watkins, who has got great fixtures coming up and he continues to return, or Darwin, who, again, may have a double in 25, has been performing very well recently if you forget about the penalty miss and the 4 times hitting the woodwork. And lots of you have Solanke, who returned once again in Game Week 22. So there are no good options for us to remove. And I do still feel like Alvarez is the obvious one. If you're bringing in Haaland, it's because you think Haaland will start. That immediately means Alvarez can't start up top and Alvarez no longer has penalties. So you lose 2 of the advantages of Alvarez immediately. You then chuck KDB into the equation and you think his minutes probably aren't going to be overly good. So yes, I probably still do think Alvarez is the best player to sell if you're bringing in Haaland, but I don't feel great about it, and I would not be surprised to see Alvarez start either as the 9 again, with Haaland on the bench, or instead of KDB in Game Week 23, and I think there will be many a game this season where Alvarez continues to start. Hopefully I've answered all of your questions there. I know I haven't really given any answers. I've kind of asked more questions than I have given answers, but that's the way I do content. I don't tell you the answer because I don't know. I'm not all-knowing. I don't know anything beyond what you guys know. I'll just present my opinion often and hopefully allow you to come to your own conclusions. But my understanding at the moment, to recap, best City triple up for me would be Haaland, Foden, KDB. I wouldn't be going for the defence. Foden is a slight minutes risk, but I still think he's a fine option. I think KDB will start more games than not, although I'm slightly more hesitant about 23. My prediction is Haaland starts and gets around 60 minutes against Brentford. And yes, I still think if you are to sell someone for Haaland, it probably is just about Alvarez, but I'm not feeling great about that. So obviously lots of questions coming in around Mohamed Salah as well. Is he a sell right now? If you've got 2 free transfers, the obviously ability to do Salah to someone else and bring Haaland in, is he the one that needs to be sold given the fixtures? What is going on with this possible double game week 25? So we'll discuss all of that. On Mohamed Salah, I'm again recording this on Thursday evening, so I don't have a definitive update around Salah. But 3 days ago, Liverpool posted a picture which said recovery work for Salah. It's on your screen, and it was Salah, looks like very lightly jogging on the grass in trainers with no other training in sight. So yes, he's doing some sort of cardiovascular activity. It looks like a very, very light jog, but he's not in football boots. There are no balls in sight, and he's therefore you would appear to be definitely nowhere near team training. So I don't think this is overly positive, but at least it shows that he's moving, and he's probably not months and months away. So on the injury, I would still predict that it's a very, very tight squeeze for Game Week 25. I don't think based on this and based on the updates we've had, that he's probably going to quite be available for Game Week 24 against Burnley. And therefore, I think you are probably looking at just about in time for that Brentford away fixture, which therefore, even if there is a double game week, probably puts into question, is he going to be fit and available to start both in the double? So injury-wise, I don't think it looks particularly great. Just around this Liverpool double game week in 25. To recap, why we think it is so critical that the Premier League put this double in 25. And at the time of you watching this, I think the announcement will be tomorrow, on Friday, the day of you watching this. They've got to announce it. The reason that they've got to announce it, if they don't put the blank game week fixture of Liverpool and Luton in game week 25, it basically means that if Liverpool reach, I've put the final here, I actually think it's the semi-final of the FA Cup and obviously the Europa League. If they reach the semi-final of both of those competitions, they have 0 remaining midweeks to put the Liverpool-Luton fixture. There is not a single free midweek to put that fixture if they reach the semi-finals of those two cups. What that means, therefore, is they're going to be in a position where if they don't put this fixture in game week 25, which is the remaining free midweek, they are going to have a triple game week, which you might say sounds great from an FPL perspective, but it means Liverpool are going to have to play Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, probably Saturday or Sunday again. They are, as you can see here, going to have to play 7 games from the 9th of May to the 25th of May, which means a game every 2.4 days for 7 games straight. I don't understand how the Premier League and Liverpool are allowing this. They've made this mistake in the past as well. They can't wait. And you may say, well, statistically, it's very unlikely Liverpool make both semi-finals. I don't think it's that statistically unlikely. I think it's very probable, given the way that they're playing as well. So I don't think you can rely on the fact that they're going to knocked out, or fingers crossed that they get knocked out and there will therefore be a free midweek. You've just got to take matters into your own hands, in my opinion, and just put this fixture in game week 25. So I still think it will be announced. But what I should say is, if it hasn't been announced by the game week 23 deadline, then I think we change our opinions. If it's not announced by Saturday morning, I think we hold our hands up and say, the Premier League are just being weird about this. They're not going to put the fixture in 25. This is probably no longer a double game week, because it gives fans only just over 2 weeks notice, which is ridiculous. You need to give fans at least 3 or 4 weeks. I know it's a bit of a passionate rant. I just find it so strange that the Premier League aren't doing it. The only little bit of an inkling, you can see this calendar next to me on the 21st of February. That's when the Luton-Liverpool fixture will go. Someone very, very clever over on Twitter found that actually the day that the Liverpool-Luton fixture is due to be rescheduled, if it is to go into game week 25, Liverpool have actually blocked stadium tour tickets from being sold. So you can't get a tour of Anfield on the 21st of Feb, which is when we believe the Liverpool-Luton fixture would go. Now, they have blocked out other days randomly as well, so this could just be a coincidence. But there is nothing due to be happening on that Wednesday, apart from this fixture. So I still think the announcement will take place tomorrow. Again, you might know at the time of you watching, I should say. If it is a double game week, very brief, and you can skip, if we know anything around this, you can skip this section if it's getting a bit confusing. But let's say that it is a double game week. Maybe you try and hold on to Salah until game week 24 if it's possible. And the reason that I say that is it's Burnley, Brentford, Luton in 2 game weeks and a really nice double. If he is a little bit further along in his recovery than we think, and he's almost back for 24, but definitely back for Brentford, you're going to want a fit Mohamed Salah for Brentford and Luton in a double game week. So if you are not in a position where you need to sell him for for 23, and you don't feel like you need to go out there and get Haaland, or you have another route to Haaland, I wouldn't rush Salah out of your teams. But for a lot of us, myself included, it's going to require quite a bit of surgery to bring in Haaland without selling Salah, and there's no guarantee of a double at the moment, and there's no guarantee that he'll even be fit. So my personal opinion is I would feel comfortable selling him, because there are various reasons that I think it's fine. But just bear in mind that there is a chance there's a double, there's a chance he's back, and you may regret doing that if you do sell him. So Ivan Toney, obviously a man in high demand, and I absolutely get it. And he's a player that I desperately want to bring into my team as well. But we've just discussed the fact that a lot of us have Solanke, Watkins, Darwin, and Alvarez, right? Those four, plus maybe a João Pedro who's potentially injured, so it might make it a little bit easier for you. But those 4 or 5, most of us want to keep those players. You then need to think about how you bring in Haaland into your team. And then Toney, who's quite expensive, also putting himself out there as a very, very decent option. So is Ivan Toney worth bringing in? Some people have said, would you maybe ignore Haaland for now until he's back starting and maybe move for Toney instead? Is Toney in my ideal front 3 at the moment? And we just spoke about my ideal City triple up. My ideal front 3 would be Toney, Haaland, and then probably just about Ollie Watkins. If I had all of the money in the world and I was on a wild card, it would probably be those 3. But that's very, very expensive as a front line. The fixtures in general, if you just look at them, are absolutely horrific for Brentford. They are stinky, and they're not even good after this. They're not good, actually, until about game week 33, but the end of the season for Brentford, from 33 to 38, is remarkably good. So we are going to want to own probably Toney for the back end of the season, but these fixtures aren't good. Even with the double, I mean, their double is Liverpool and City. They play City twice in the space of 3 game weeks. They play Arsenal away in this spell as well. I would even say that their 2 away fixtures, Wolves and West Ham, they're not perfect, right? Wolves are much better at Molineux. West Ham can turn it on at random points. So fixtures-wise, I hate them. But Toney can score against anyone. It's a bit of a cliche saying, I don't think he's fixture-proof, but if Brentford score, it's usually Toney. And I think Toney has the capability to score against most teams. We saw him, was it last season, when he didn't get the England call-up? Did he score 2 against Man City, I think? So he can do it. The thing that we love about Brentford's fixtures, and you've probably heard this now, so I'll keep it short. Not only do Brentford double in game week 25, which is obviously good, even though it's not the perfect set of fixtures. It's nice to have a double game week, 2 chances to get a return. But they are also one of very few teams that definitely play in both blank game week 26 and blank game week 29. In blank game week 26, you're going to need your whole team. But blank game week 29 in particular, not only is he a player that definitely has a fixture, he's probably one of the better captaincy options. Given the projected fixtures that we're expecting, there probably aren't going to be many better players because he has Burnley at home in game week 29. So yes, the fixtures aren't perfect, but given you have a double game week, an okay set of fixtures from 24 to 27, and you also have him in both of the upcoming blank game weeks, it then makes you look at the fixtures and think, they're not great, but they're certainly not the worst. And you can rely on him every single week for you. And I like that. I like that about him. There's no risk of an upcoming ban due to yellow cards. He's very, very good for injuries usually. Fingers crossed I don't jinx that now, but he's very consistent. He's come back and he's played back-to-back 90 minutes. So I love everything about him from a minutes perspective. Penalties, data's always good. I think he'll score goals. It's just the fixtures really aren't good when you look at them each individually. But as a sort of collection, when you look at him being available in the blanks, then maybe he is a good option. So I'll leave it there. Basically, I think Toney is an excellent buy. I think he's an excellent pick if you're wildcarding soon. But I do worry, is he a priority? When we're trying to focus on bringing Haaland in, we maybe need to sell Salah. We're maybe worrying about players that we need to remove in like defensive midfield for blank game week 26, such as Palmer and Porro. Is going out there and doing like Watkins to Toney a bit of a luxury transfer? I certainly think you don't need to do it for 23. And I think maybe Wolves in game week 24, if Haaland's not available or if we make that move in 23, maybe something like, I don't know, like a Solanke to Toney in 24, may be quite a desirable transfer for many. Let me know what you think on Ivan Toney down below. So guys, very briefly, I thought I would just finish off with some of my updated thoughts around my team and what I'm currently planning on doing ahead of the 23 deadline. But just bear in mind, we will get a lot of information, hopefully the day if you watch this on Friday, and therefore I probably won't make my end transfers until the deadline stream, and that probably includes captaincy as well. So this is just my updated thoughts as of Thursday evening, but make sure to tune into the deadline stream on Saturday morning. So my thoughts now around Haaland is I do think I'm going to want him for 23 unless we get a negative update from Pep in the press conference, because my prediction is that he starts. And I think given I have the 2 free transfers this week, I think he's a player that I want to bring in. And yes, I don't want to lose any of my forwards, but I'm going to have to do that at some point. I'm not going to want to lose any of my forwards next week. I'm not going to want to lose any of my forwards the week after that. It's not until blank game week 26 I don't mind losing. Darwin is the first player that I'd be happy selling. So I'm going to have to make difficult decisions. Why not do it now when I think is going to be Haaland's first start and just get ahead slightly? So that's the current plan. And yes, it probably is Salah. So my thoughts at the moment is I've got two different ways to do this. I could just do like Salah to Gordon, as I said, who I think is a really, really nice option at that price. And it will give me some money to play with. And then I do think it will be Alvarez. Now, I actually think there's a good chance Alvarez starts against Brentford. But I think across the next 3 or 4 game weeks, I think Alvarez is the slightly weaker option of the 3. That being said, I just think if we don't get this double announcement for Liverpool, am I that desperate to hang on to Darwin? Because he is great. I love Darwin. You guys know I love Darwin. But Arsenal this week, not good. Burnley and Brentford are decent. But then he blanks. Then it's Man City in 28 after Forest, of course. And then they're going to blank in 29 almost definitely. So I'm looking at 2 blanks in the space of 4 weeks. Man City. So it's blank, Forest, City, blank. It's really not good. So maybe Darwin's the one to sell, and maybe I hold on to Alvarez. But Alvarez's fixtures after 26 aren't ideal either. Remember, they've got Man City, Liverpool, Brighton, and Arsenal. So, I mean, I'm going back and forth on this, but let's just say for now it's Alvarez. It would just be simple. Gordon in for Salah, and then Haaland in for Alvarez, and I've still got 2.2 million in the bank there. That's probably what I'm looking at the moment. The other alternative, like I said before in my team selection video, is let's say I actually want a cheeky Haaland. Cheeky KDB, I should say, because I still think De Bruyne, Foden, and Haaland may well be the best triple up. I would need to find 2.4 million. Now, I looked at this earlier. I don't love the idea of selling Saka, I should know. I still think Saka's absolutely fine as a keep. But something like that for a -4. Gordon, De Bruyne, I'm going to click make transfers, but not actually make the transfers. It would be Saka, Salah, and Alvarez to Gordon, De Bruyne, and Haaland. And no, that doesn't sound perfect on paper by any means, but if we're expecting Alvarez's minutes to be less secure, if we're not sure that Salah is going to be fit enough for 25, and we're not sure of a double, and Saka I think is fine, but as a make way to allow me to get Haaland, De Bruyne, and Gordon in, that feels like a -4, which could work out absolutely brilliantly. The other option I've got, if I want to keep Salah, is like I said, I can remove Trent, but now due to Haaland going up and Alvarez dropping, I actually have to bring in a 3.9 now. I don't have the money for Van Heck. So I'm less keen on doing this now due to price changes. So I think it will have to be Salah that goes if I decide I want to bring Haaland in, unless I want to do crazy stuff like selling both Saka and Watkins or Saka and Darwin. And I just think it starts to get a little bit too confusing and I have to make too many sacrifices. Finally, I'll just note, if I decide that Haaland isn't going to come in for GameWeek 23, then I'll probably just make a defender transfer and roll the other one. And it will probably be, I think I've decided, unless Pau Torres is confirmed being out for like months, I think I prefer the idea of selling Charlie Taylor. Who I would bring in, I don't know. It could actually genuinely be a Newcastle defender. Because yes, they don't have a great fixture in 26, but I kind of feel like I could rely on them outside of that. And it may be that I even decide to keep them after blank game week 29 if I don't wildcard until 33, which is the probable plan at the moment. So I like the idea of bringing in a Botman or a Burn. I'd probably go Botman because his minutes are slightly more secure. And then I would look at bringing in Haaland the week after that. So those are the possible plans at the moment. I'll leave it there because we'll discuss all of that on the deadline stream. But yeah, let me know what your transfer plans are for 23. Let me know what you plan on doing with Erling Haaland. So guys, there you have it. That is my Game Week 23 deadlines decision video. Hopefully you did enjoy that. And if you did, please make sure to smash that like button. And if you're still watching at this point and you're not yet subscribed, please do consider subscribing. I really do appreciate it. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.